Olá, protagonistas! Vocês já viram aqui um estudo muito interessante, que é o estudo de liberdade econômica feito pela Heritage Foundation. Você tem aí o acesso completo pela Gazeta do Povo. A gente explicou como é que funciona e por que, infelizmente, a liberdade econômica no Brasil vem caindo. A gente tem agora o privilégio de receber aqui, nos nossos estúdios, um dos responsáveis por esse estudo, para a gente falar um pouquinho sobre Brasil, sobre as nossas perspectivas, sobre liberdade econômica. Ele é um cara que já trabalhou no Departamento de Estado dos Estados Unidos, que é como se fosse o Ministério das Relações Exteriores deles. Ao contrário da maioria dos americanos que a gente tem na cabeça, que eles só veem Estados Unidos, ele tem uma visão de mundo, já morou em vários países, conhece bastante do Brasil e vai conversar aqui com a gente. O James Roberts está aqui nos estúdios da Protagonista. Muito obrigada, é um prazer ter você aqui.
Obrigado,
Thank you very much.
Obrigado, feliz de estar aqui, como eu disse, mas infelizmente não falo muito bem português, mas I'm happy to be here, thank you.
A gente vai fazer, como sempre, a entrevista no idioma da pessoa que vem aqui para você. Você vai ler aqui a tradução, mas vai poder olhar no olho da pessoa e conseguir sentir aí exatamente o que ela quer dizer para você. James, I'd like to start asking you, knowing what you know about Brazil, writing about our economic freedom, sometimes I keep thinking why we accept this so much. Why we as Brazilians accept this kind of situation. I think I cannot analyze it so well because I am Brazilian. I've been born here, I live here. And what do you think about it? Why do we accept this kind of thing?
Well, good question. And thank you for talking about our Index of Economic Freedom, which people can find on our website at heritage.org/index. And if you look at Brazil, I mean, Brazil is a huge country, the biggest in South America, the 5th biggest economy in the world, and it should be doing better than it is. It's way down in our listing, down at 153. It's almost toward the bottom, and there's really there's a lot of room for improvement in Brazil. And some of the areas that the biggest problems include debt, include government spending, and government integrity. You've had all these scandals in the last few years. And people can go and look in our website at the performance of Brazil really since we started this index 25 years ago with the Wall Street Journal. And I mean, I think part of the problem is one that the left is always trying to push, which is to get more and more people dependent on government and to have a stake in constantly expanding government. And so, I mean, I know that that's been the case in Argentina with the Peronists, the way that operated. I just did a study with a young scholar here in Brasilia with the Instituto Monte Castelo, Gabriel Arruda. And the title of our paper was that big government is crushing economic freedom in Brazil. And so I think that's really the issue. I think it's how are people going to, get control of government and decentralize it, make fewer people, benefit from government, and have a stronger role for true free market competition. And that would include not giving favoritism to private companies, but it's obviously a very complicated question, but a good question.
And also we have lots of people depending on government, but depending on a way in which they will never have equal opportunities, because they depend on like monthly stipends like Bolsa Família, but when it comes to education, we fund master degrees, but we don't have a good fundamental education that would really change lives in this country. We don't have good basic health care. We don't take care of clean water for everyone. We are getting measles and we are getting polio back. And
yellow fever, I know you have.
Yeah, yellow fever we have, but yellow fever wasn't such a scandal as polio. Polio we just have in 3 countries in the world, and the 3 were in war on the last decades. We haven't been in war in a century. And those kind of spendings, I think they are alarming, because we have politicians earning a lot, public sector employees having all those retiree payments, pensions and everything. And people always depending on this government. But on the other side, do you think the private sector in Brazil is competitive enough?
No, I don't. I think that's been part of the problem, has been that this marriage, of convenience between government and big companies, and it's a problem in the States, it's a problem everywhere, that big companies can buy influence, they can buy lobbyists, as we say, to get favorable laws and favorable treatment by the government. So those are all things that we penalize countries for in our Index of Economic Freedom. But so it isn't just the government, it is also they say rent-seeking companies that are looking for a special advantage from the government. But you're right, the problem with the poor people who are getting very small benefits is that then that works against them, because it works to them to disincentivize them to work harder or to be innovative or to take risks or to do something entrepreneurial, because they're dependent on this little tiny bit of money. So it's really an immoral kind of system. I know in Buenos Aires there are families that have 2 and 3 generations that have been dependent on the government and not working, and that's a terrible thing for the human potential of those children. Those children should be encouraged to work hard, get education. Certainly there need to be opportunities, but there also have to be incentives, I think, to do that. So that's something I've also written about, how the Bolsa Familia doesn't have the right incentives in it. It incentivizes people to stay on the assistance and not to graduate from it.
I think we don't have this mind of helping children to achieve, to fulfill their dreams, because dreams can be different. We have this wrong idea that success means necessarily making money. I don't think that. I think, for instance, a priest is a kind of success. A good pastor is a kind of success. Someone that teaches children how to read and write is a huge kind of success. I think that. But we don't give this kind of incentive to children, because here in Brazil we focus only in buying things. We don't have values.
Very materialistic. And so is the United States, really, I think, increasingly. And you're right, it's the little everyday heroes that make a society work. As Edmund Burke, the famous English philosopher, said, they were little platoons. And that's what any society needs for a successful economy and political stability, I think.
I know that Heritage Foundation now has a huge influence on Trump's administration.
That's what people say.
No, and people say it because when it came to have people for making a government, you had people ready to serve.
Right, yeah.
And I like the way people are called to serve the government in the US. It's something we don't have here. You say, would you like to serve the people for 2 years, for 4 years?
Right.
Here in Brazil, people serve themselves. It's a mess. But how was it? How was this movement? Did you get ready to that? Do you have this value of serving the country? I'm curious about it.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, the ideal of how the think tanks work in the United States is that they are part of civil society, and they also help to strengthen democracy by having a place. So when we have two major parties in the U.S., which are basically coalitions of smaller groups. And so when one party is out of power, they can go to, people from that party could go to a think tank or many other places, but to wait and to keep current with things and publish opinions from the opposition. And so that's been the role of Heritage and other think tanks, excuse me, so that when our side gets in, we have people who are ready to go, who are very up to speed on the issues and have policy ideas. And so we have been fortunate that the Trump administration has adopted many of our ideas. So we're happy about that. And also the people who give us money, who pay our salaries, are also happy about that, because we don't get any government money. We are completely privately funded. So, and that's something. I know that in Brazil there hasn't been as long a tradition of having think tanks, but I think it can be good for a country to have that, so that people can, leave power and then go back in when their side is in office.
Because this is the idea, is that you serve the country to implement that policies you believe in.
Right.
You are not professional politicians.
No. We are scholars. Some of us have experience in government. I did, but we're not politicians. We're more what you might call technocrats, but not in the sense of being professional government employees all the time. We're willing to be out of the government and doing other things besides just being in government, which I think is healthy. Is to have people come into the government who aren't, again, kind of victims almost of the system and afraid to do anything to disrupt it. You want to have people come in with fresh ideas who aren't afraid about the consequences for them personally. If the ideas are right, and they say it breaks rice bowls in the sense of Asia, but the government is constantly in need of reform because, as Lord Acton said, power corrupts. Yeah. And so there's always the potential for corruption when you have government spending other people's money, as Margaret Thatcher said, until they run out of it, But, so that's, I think, in general, the idea of how a think tank is supposed to operate.
Here in Brazil, we have a phenomenon that's the Trumpism. Here in Brazil, people like to treat politicians as Catholic saints. And so we have Lula. Now we have the right-wing Lula, that's Bolsonaro. And Trump is one of that saints as well. How do you see Donald Trump?
Well, I think most people were surprised he won. I think he was surprised he won, frankly. I think he's not a politician. I think people were tired of politicians, and the past administration of Obama pushed the United States very, very far to the left, very quickly. And the United States has generally been a more conservative country than that. And the people, more than half the people, are conservative. And in fact, the Republican Party, the more conservative party, has gained a tremendous amount of power in the years that Obama was in office. So I think there was a reaction against that. At Heritage, we advocate for the ideas and principles of conservatism. And so we don't focus on individuals and personality cults. We want politicians to take office, not to enrich themselves, but to advance these policies for the betterment of the whole country. And so that's so whether it's Trump or whoever is president, we're going to continue to advocate for policies, and we're glad when they're adopted, and if they're not, we keep trying.
How much time do you think we are going to take to be this mature here, and do not wait, for the great father to save us all?
Yeah, well, you'll wait a long time for that, and you end up with somebody who's just taking advantage of you. So, like a Hugo Chavez or something, or a Juan Perón, who are out for themselves. I mean,
we always end like this.
How did Hugo Chavez's daughter get $4 billion? She didn't earn it, I don't think. So.
She found on the street, on the lottery. Those lotteries. Those lotteries here in Latin America.
I worked at the American Embassy in Panama, and I remember that the wife of the president just happened to win the lottery twice. So
here, once we have an investigative commission, the guy won the lottery more than 30 times. You know how lucky he is in Latin America.
That's pretty lucky.
Yeah, God is Brazilian.
Well, I mean, every country in the world is struggling to be better, and it's a never-ending battle. That's one of the major areas we look at in this index, is about the rule of law and about how countries fight corruption, because corruption is always there, and there's always the temptation. So, I would say Brazil did make quite a bit of progress, especially under Cardoso, I think, and the Lula in his first term, it seemed to me, was still doing okay. Then he started to get more to the left and build up this Bindus Bank and other things. So, I think Brazil has another chance now with this election to continue in a different direction and focus more on the institutions of government and on strengthening the rule of law. And opening up the market. And those things alone will help Brazil, as they've helped the United States and other countries, to get more mature.
And how do you see the Operation Car Wash?
Well, it seemed to me, and I'm not an expert on Brazil, I don't study Brazil all the time, but it seemed to me that it was a good sign that the judicial system here was strong enough to pursue very powerful people, and the courts have been doing their job, really, from my perspective. So, I mean, I would say that I'm not surprised about Operation Car Wash, because again, when the government, through huge companies like Petrobras, I mean, they have all this money, the temptations are very big. And some people are not very strong, or they're also people who are out to take advantage of things. So I think it's at the end of the day, it's probably been a healthy thing for Brazil. It looks to me, as an outsider. But.
Yeah, for me it was an absolute surprise, because I have never thought in my lifetime, I've never thought I would see in my lifetime an ex-president, a Senate representative, House representative go into jail. And all those businessmen. I've never thought it would happen in Brazil.
Yeah.
For me, it was like, whoa, what's happening? But I also wanted to ask you some other things happened in the world I've never thought I would see in my lifetime. Like the two Koreas getting together, and it was done by the apprentice guy. It was done by the apprentice guy. And I was like, whoa, from you were fired to this. And we see things are not so simple in the world like the social media buzz makes it seem like.
Right.
So government is not like sentences people like to say, or simplifications people make. The thing of the two Koreas, I think it was very, very meaningful to many other policies that are developing now, isn't it?
Yeah, I do think Trump being the disruptive sort of approach that he takes, I mean, we're going to have to see how it actually works out, though, because so far the North Koreans have not disarmed, and they are still the proxies of the Chinese, who are still trying to expand their power and influence throughout Southeast and Northeast Asia. So that's going to be something that's going to have to continue. The pressure is going to have to be on. The North could take out the South Korea very, very quickly. They have millions of troops. I don't think that problem is solved, but I think it was good that Trump took a kind of a unique approach to try to shake it up. As long as the standards are not weakened and we continue to hold out for a complete disarmament by the North. So we'll see how that goes. It's a game with the Chinese and with this family and this awful family in North Korea that is like a big gangster mafia family that has, you know, a guy who kills his own uncle with an artillery shell or something, or he killed generals. This is a bad person, and he's killed his own brother in Singapore, you know, or half brother. So I don't think we should be under any illusions that this problem has been solved yet. But I do think it was good to have a fresh start.
Or not worsen it. I think it's...
Yeah, well, they've stopped the missile testing, at least for now, but there are also signs that they're continuing to develop the program. So we'll just have to see if the Trump administration can continue to put the pressure on. And I think that part of these actions that are being taken by the Trump administration against China are clearly connected to this Chinese support for North Korea.
Chinese people are gaining huge space, a huge development in Africa, in African countries. They are taking place now from the Brazilian companies that...
Like Odebrecht.
Odebrecht, Camargo Correia, Soares Penido, OAS. They are taking places in Portugal, in Cabo Verde, in Angola, in Mozambique, São Tomé, and they are investing heavily in construction, in whatever they can, but in a different way. It's not like the Occidental way of investing. They are, I don't know, more aggressive in investing. They are coming to Brazil to invest in more aggressively. Do you think Chinese will replace the American leadership soon? As we hear, here in Brazil we hear, you have to teach Chinese to your children. Do you think this is real?
I don't think so. I think it's more and more people are realizing the game the Chinese are playing, which is to lend countries too much money, more than they need, more than they can pay back. Then they bring their own people in, all their own products, labor. Then they leave thousands of their people behind because they have population problems. So they put people in every country they go to, and I don't think it's part of a long-term plan that they have to assert their power, extend their power, project, as they say, project their power throughout the world, especially in key spots like the Horn of Africa, the Red Sea, Sri Lanka. They've been in Venezuela for a long time. They're in Nicaragua, talking about another canal. So they're projecting their power as a big country. But I don't think that they have doubled down on communism, and communism is a failed system. It can never succeed. So Xi Jinping has said he loves Karl Marx, but that's a loser. That's, at the end of the day, I think he knows how to talk tough and sound really convincing, but I think they have a lot of weakness in their economy. They have very corrupt and inefficient state-owned enterprises that nobody really knows the condition of. So, I think it's an issue, but I don't think they're going to displace American leadership in the near future, especially not in this hemisphere. So.
I've lived in a communist country. I've lived in Angola. And I can sense what you were saying, because it's really weird, because when you live in a communist country, because of the corruption and the lack of money and the lack of everything for the population, people only think about money. And for instance, in the US, where you have the capitalism and the liberalism, all my friends do volunteer work and social work and everything, because things are easy for them. They will have their jobs, they will have food, they will have everything. So they don't have to be thinking about money every single hour of their lives. I think the human condition, at the end of the day, is the main thing politicians have to think. And they don't put this in the center of their discourses nowadays. I think this is a thing that the left in Brazil has lost, isn't it?
Well, I can't say for sure, but I do know that basically these socialist governments, they all end up ruling by, because they're failed systems economically, and they can't generate the prosperity and the basic goods. You look at Venezuela, this is a disaster, a humanitarian catastrophe. And so they end up basically ruling with police state tactics. And then people are constantly just thinking about where's the next meal going to come from for their family, or where they're going to get medicine. And so you have a tremendous loss of human capital in that case for a country, and people leave. So certainly people, I think Brazil just closed the border with Venezuela this week, I think.
They've closed I think 3 days ago, and reopened it now. The Supreme Court has reopened.
Well, it's a very bad situation in Venezuela, but the international left, the media and the left, they don't want to talk about how this is an example of how socialism is a disaster, and they won't. They'll point fingers at the United States or something else, but that's the reality: is that system doesn't work, and so therefore, at the end of the day, I don't think that the Chinese system is going to work. It's a huge country, and they have a kind of a mindset, mentality of almost worshiping an emperor in this case, and whether it's Mao Zedong or it's Xi, and that's a cultural issue, and as we've been talking about, culture is very important in this whole mix. But I still think that the Chinese are ultimately going to slow down in terms of their economic growth.
I want to end with one thing that's very important for Gazeta do Povo, that's principles. And I believe in this too. I think no rule can stand without principles. In a country, in a family, in a personal life, in a professional life. And we talk about economics, we talk about politics, and we don't talk very much about principles, about choosing people of principles and of purpose. Do you believe, is it still possible to have people with purpose and principles in politics?
Well, I hope so, and I think, and that's up to each individual person, like everybody watching this show, or, you know, people involved in their local communities and churches. I think that just, the first step is just influencing what they call this, your own sphere of influence for the better, and, you know, setting a good example for your family or your children. But there's only so much any one person can do, but I think certainly having a free press and free media, and you know, the problems that you're seeing with Facebook and social media limiting the availability of information, that's very dangerous and very bad. And so, you know, shows like this, you know, people need to be able to talk and listen and think about ideas other than maybe what they've been accustomed to. So I think that's one way that at least good principles, if not good people, can make some progress.
Bom, gente, a gente teve a honra de receber aqui um dos responsáveis pelo Índice Econômico da Heritage Foundation, que tem aqui, ó, o Índice de Liberdade Econômica em inglês, chiquérrimo. Foi publicada a tradução com exclusividade no Brasil pela Gazeta do Povo. Vocês acompanharam aqui todo o lançamento e a gente trouxe aqui para conversar melhor com a gente ele, que é pesquisador para liberdade econômica e crescimento do Centro para Livre Mercados e Reforma Regulatória do Instituto para a Liberdade Econômica e Oportunidades da Heritage Foundation, o James Roberts. Muito obrigada por ter vindo aqui, uma grande honra ter tido essa oportunidade de conversar com você aqui no programa Protagonista. Valeu mesmo.
Muito obrigado a você.
Valeu, galera. Beijo, tchau.